Today, we are doing Mozart, Brahms, and Joplin. I know they sound like a funny combination, but somehow I feel that all the pieces go together. Um, um, and I will talk about that a little bit more as I go along. But I'm going to start with the Mozart Sonata number 8. It's in D major. He wrote it in the year 1777, which is the year that he went on a big European tour. And he started off in Germany, in Austria, obviously in Salzburg, and then he toured the surrounding towns, and he went through Germany, and then on to Paris and Italy, and London too, across the channel. This piece, which is Kirkel 311, as I said, was written in 1777 for his stay in Mannheim. In the 18th century, Mannheim was a famous musical center in Germany. They had a huge, very accomplished orchestra. A composer you have probably never heard of, a family of composers actually, the Stamitz family was from Mannheim, and they were famous family of composers in the 18th century. Karl and Johann, his son, and there was a Ludwig in there too somewhere. Anyway, so Mozart wrote this sonata, and he he threw in all the bells and whistles. He wrote it not only to show off what a good composer he was, but what a good piano player he was. The piece is a real tour de force of piano playing. It's got these things where, the right hand does, and then the left hand does it. And that, they have to sound alike, or people know that your left hand isn't as good as your right hand. It's not easy. I'm just doing the first movement, which is marked Allegro con spirito. And the interesting thing about it is, I've talked about sonatas before. All sonatas supposedly work the same way. They start with a theme. And then they go through various stuff, and they cadence in the dominant. Yeah, so far so good. And then there's a development section, and as I say, Mozart explores various aspects of the theme. But the weird thing about this piece is when it comes back to the recap, you would expect it to cadence something like this. And you'd have your opening theme again. Well, Mozart kind of thumbing his nose at convention, and he comes back to the recap. And he skips the first theme. He goes to the second theme. So if you were sitting in the audience in the year 1777, you would be very confused by this and not know exactly what was going on. And then to tweak people's noses even further, at the very end, when he's about to cadence, what does he do? He throws in the first theme again. So now people really don't know what's going to happen. They're thinking, oh my God, are we going to have to sit through a whole nother recap section? Which you don't have to. But it's a really, really clever piece, and Mozart's showing off, how much a master of the form he is, that he can play with it like this. And he's also tweaking all the scholarly people sitting in the Mannheim audience and kind of poking fun at them a little bit. So this is Mozart Sonata Number 8, first movement. Oh, the other thing about D major. D major is always a very outgoing, very happy, festive key for Mozart. Um, from the beginning of his life until the very end. You know, the overture to Marriage of Figaro. You know, which is, you know, used in movies for every upbeat, happy kind of scene, D major. So here we go. next piece is by Johannes Brahms. Brahms was a late, well, not really late, mid-19th century composer, German, was born in Hamburg, Germany. Ended up settling in Austria and Vienna, like so many other famous composers. Lived most of his life in Vienna, and in fact, he rented, not that this has anything to do with anything, but he rented an apartment in Vienna that was over a brothel. So he was, by that time, past the age when he would have given his attention to the ladies. So they apparently were quite fond of him, and he was quite fond of them, and in a rather fatherly way, apparently. Not that that has anything to do with what he wrote, but he was, again, a virtuoso piano player, wrote 2 huge piano concertos, a whole bunch of really, really, really astonishing piano music. I'm going to eventually play more of them, but for today, I'm going to play, it's a group of 1, 2, 3, 4, I never counted them, 5, 6 pieces, opus 118, 6 piano pieces. They're all very, we're not sure, but they're not extended pieces. They all have, titles that imply they're not long pieces. The first 2 are called Intermezzo. An intermezzo is just a fancy name for saying a short piece of piano music. When it's not in an opera or an interlude in the middle of something, which is what intermezzo means, in the middle. The third one is called a ballade. The fourth one is another intermezzo. The fifth one is called a romance. And the sixth one is another intermezzo. It's just a fancy way for saying a short piano piece. I'm going to play the second one, which is in A major. Brahms, of course, has a very different harmonic language than Mozart. It's a very dense type of texture. Very, very, very German, weighty and thoughtful. But the way he approaches his tunes and the way he builds them and resolves them, he's very indebted to Mozart and Beethoven. It's a very Mozart way of doing things, Build to a middle, and you come down again. A lot of Mozart in there. So it's also in A major, which is a very compatible key with D major. So I kind of thought they hung together. So this is the Intermezzo, Opus 118, number 2. And the tempo indication, he says, a tender andante. So he wants it to be, evocative and tender. And it seems like an unusual thing to go with it, but I'm going to pair with it the Joplin Heliotrope Bouquet Rag. Composers, not all composers, but many composers have certain keys that have certain associations with them. Mozart, D major and G major, very outgoing keys. D minor and A minor, very turbulent. You know, the Mozart D minor piano concerto. Or the A minor sonata. Very, very turbulent. For Joplin, G major is a very, very, very serene, nostalgic key. I've looked through his stuff, and almost without exception, anything in G major is a very serene, Brahmsian type of piece. He calls this. He wrote this piece in collaboration with Louis Chauvin. I'm not quite sure how much of Louis Chauvin got into the piece, because it seems an awful lot like a lot of Joplin. I might, if I can get my hands on some Louis Chauvin scores, I'll play a Louis Chauvin rag and show the contrast. But this is very Joplin. And it does remind me of Sunflowers. It has this sort of, big, round, kind of like a sunflower theme. And there's it inhabits the same world as the Brahms. Let's see, I'll do the Brahms in G so that you can kind of get the idea. This is the Brahms theme. And this is Joplin. Very, very sort of the same type of tone world. Of course, Brahms, the harmony in Brahms is a lot more sophisticated than this ragtime harmony. Which is this called Heliotrope Bouquet, a slow drag two-step. And it's very interesting. The composer's put in the corner, it says, NB, pay attention. Do not play this piece fast. It is never right to play ragtime fast, period. Composers. So, I find I play it very similarly to the Brahms with that same type of spacious approach. So, Heliotrope Bouquet by Scott Joplin and Louis Chauvin.